Hey, what's up, guys? It's Adam and Shane from Rescue Michigan, and we've got a lot of things to cover tonight. It's been a little while since we've done a video. Been a little while since we've done an email blast, actually, but a lot's happened in the past week, and a lot's coming up very soon, including some language on a citizen-initiated law that we've been talking about for a long time. We're hoping to have something for that very, very shortly here, perhaps as soon even as Monday. And by the way, you may have also noticed that on the Board of State Canvassers website, they have posted the proposed language for Unlock Michigan Part 2 to end the governor's last ability to impose emergency orders through the Public Health Code. Since the state Supreme Court shut down the Emergency Powers of Governor Act last year, this is the last thing that she'd been using, which is still important, even though we're not locked down right now, because there's little stopping her from doing it again, especially if there's an uptick in the illness in the fall when it's flu season again, or who knows what else it could be. There's certainly been talk on the left that they're thinking about declaring a climate emergency and using that to destroy people's civil liberties again. So, exciting news. We're going to be having a Unlock Michigan Part 2. Perhaps we'll be collecting 2 petition signatures as one at once to overrule the governor's veto on election integrity and on preventing any future lockdowns. So that should be pretty exciting. And I did notice, because I'd heard that Stand Up Michigan was planning on doing Unlock Part 2. And it turns out, no. Actually, the group that has filed for the petitions is actually Unlock Michigan. It's not Stand Up Michigan. And that's been a point of confusion for a lot of people in Michigan. They think these are the same organization or they're the same thing. And how come sometimes it's Stand Up and sometimes it's Unlock? No, they're actually 2 completely separate groups. Unlock Michigan was the actual group that got the signatures last year, and Stand Up Michigan's group that just kind of gloms onto other people's work. So it's encouraging to see that Unlock Michigan is actually the group that's behind the follow-up. So we'll have a lot more to talk about that in the days and weeks to come. But I wanted to chat here with Shane for a little bit and kind of, I guess, maybe review some of the things we learned in the real nature of politics. We had, I think Dan Thiel was his name, from the Foundation for Applied Conservative Leadership, on our show last week, and he went over a lot of very important topics, especially in terms of how you get politicians to see the light when they are opposing what you are doing. And certainly we saw some of this happening this past week. The legislature has adjourned for the summer, and prior to that adjourning, about just under 10,000 citizens delivered petitions to the legislature calling for a forensic audit. Shane, you know a little bit about that. You notarized some of those, didn't you?
I notarized those, and I actually delivered a giant stack of them to Pamela Hornberger's office during the big rally. That was a great rally, one of the best ones I've been to.
Yeah.
All the lawmakers walking in and out of the Capitol were getting yelled at by people who have had enough of their BS and their lies and their unit party.
Yeah, and yet the response from the legislature, well, first of all, there was this Senate Oversight Committee report, and we're going to be looking at that in a little bit of depth tonight, although we already did a video about this. We went through it kind of almost line by line until eventually we just got exhausted. But they did talk about, well, here, I'll pull it up right now. Here's the statement from the Senate Oversight Committee report saying, a so-called forensic audit is not justifiable unless we can prove that the technology used has vulnerabilities or not. Which, okay, putting aside even the Dominion voting machines, how about the signature checks? Did the audits do any signature verifications? Did they decide how many signatures were actually valid or invalid? Did they inspect the absentee ballots?
And plus, do we even really know what's in the Dominion machines? I mean, even the Democrats were issuing letters saying that the machines, including Dominion, were very suspect in the lead up to the in a year or so before the election. So how can they clear what's in these Dominion machines or voting machines in general when they can't really even explain how they work? It's baffling.
Yep, and They didn't wait for the Arizona recount, or I should say the Maricopa County, Arizona audit to be concluded. They're still, I think they've finished the counting, but they're still preparing the final report. So you'd think they would have waited for that, but no, they jumped the gun and they said, no, we don't want to do an audit. In fact, well, this is what the Senate said, but we can report that Ann Bolin, the chair of the House Elections Committee, went on record informing a constituent that she does not support audits. I'll pull the email up for you right here. There it is. This is from Ann Bolin. Now, interestingly, we had this discussion here on our program a week and a half ago on the real nature of politics. And one of the things that we emphasized was you got to get the politicians on the record. That's why you push for roll call votes on legislation. That's why you ask to know where they're standing on legislation. And it was actually someone that watched that video who emailed Representative Bolin and asked her, what's your position on House Bill 5091? And this is the entirety of her response. Now, I did redact the email addresses. You'll notice that the 2-line here is long. It's because the person actually sent the email both to her official legislative account and to her campaign email. She responded from her campaign email address. So this is actually not even from a legislative staffer. This is from the representative herself. I would assume her campaign staff would not sign it, Ann. But look at what she says. This is the entirety of this email response. Hi there. This bill has been referred to government operations, not the Elections and Ethics Committee. Now, you guys might not know what this is, but let me explain as a former legislative staffer. This is what we like to call the committee dodge. And that's when you don't want to tell the reader what they don't want to hear. So you say, oh, I'm sorry, the legislation was not assigned to a committee that I sit on. So I'll have to come back and see where it is after it gets to the House floor or wherever it's going to go. And, you can push and say, well, no, do you support it as written or not? Because what they'll often say is, well, I can't follow every bill in every committee, or, oh, this bill might get marked up in committee and changed, and I don't want to support legislation in writing if it's going to be different later, and blah, blah, blah. And yet, despite using the committee dodge, she then proceeds right on to say, I do not support fractional voting, don't know if that was even asked, or audits. Audits, not as the Senate committee report said, future audits, not additional audits. I don't support audits. In general, I guess. I mean, as written, this is it right here. I do not support audits. In writing. Thank you, Madam Chairman. I mean,
and she was on the floor at TCF observing the fraud firsthand.
She was there?
She was on the floor. And before the election, lead up to the election, I saw her at many different Commerce Tea Party meetings where she was talking about how they were going to commit the fraud that they ended up committing on election night. Then after election night, she did a complete 180.
That's amazing.
Unreal.
Yeah. Before the election, when we were called conspiracy theorists for anticipating something might go wrong, she was there saying it was going to happen. And it does happen, and she says it didn't happen. I can't even figure that out. But amazing. And if I heard she was thinking about running for Secretary of State. Well, now she's on record opposing audits.
I hope she tries it, and I hope she wants to go into that convention and thinks she can win. I would love to fight that battle.
Yeah, I mean, here it is, folks. It's in writing. It's right here. So, best of luck to her, I guess. But anyway, getting back to talking about this Senate committee report and talking about how we need to react to this. There was actually, let me see if I can find it here. Hold on. Someone sent me, Senator Colbeck actually put together a, let's see if I can find it here. Put together a proposal to call for, I think, the censure of, it was either Ed McBroom or the whole Oversight Committee or both. Let's see if I can find it here. Hold on. Someone sent it to me. It was actually quite good what Colbeck put together. I noticed, and we're going to talk about, I've actually drafted up a potential resolution as well, and we'll talk a little bit, we'll talk in a moment about what we're looking to do with that. But Hold on, let me see if I can find this email from Pat Colbeck. Hold on one sec. Let's see here. Here we go. All right, I did find it. Let me see if I can move this to my other screen without revealing my email or something. Well, I'll just read it. He says, this is from Pat Colbeck. Colbeck calls for MIGOP to censure McBroom, Tice, and Bison. So there you go. Every lawmaker in the state of Michigan takes the following oath. I do solemnly swear or affirm that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the state, that I will faithfully discharge the duties of the office of Senator according to the best of my ability. Senators Ed McBroom, Lana Tice, and John Bison are no exception, yet on June 23rd, 2021, they voted in favor of the release of a report which they authored that clearly violated this oath of office. Quote, the committee recommends the Attorney General consider investigating those who have been utilizing misleading and false information about Antrim County to raise money or publicity for their own ends. The committee finds those promoting Antrim County as the prime evidence of a nationwide conspiracy to steal the election, place all of the statements and actions they make in a position of zero credibility. So let me pull up that statement here. It's I believe right around here. Here we go. Yeah, here we go. The committee recommends. No, here we go. The committee recommends the Attorney General consider investigation those who've been utilizing misleading and false information about Antrim County to raise money or publicity for their own. Now, 2 points here. Point number one. There is no question they're referring to certainly Matt DePerno and probably Pat Colbeck as well. DePerno is mentioned no less than 8 times in this document. It's everywhere. Here, I mean, here's in the previous page. 8 times they mentioned Matt DePerno. I think they mentioned Colbeck only once in reference to any statements that he was making. But no question they're talking about Matt DePerno. Because who else would they be talking about? We recommend the Attorney General consider investigating people. Who? Well, nobody in particular. That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. They're talking about Matt DePerno.
Absolutely, and I'd like to note that Nestle announced today that there's an official investigation into DePerno.
There is,
and yeah, and maybe even Colbeck, and they're tying it in with the whole Stan Grout payout thing. So all the people on Facebook who've been pushing that relentlessly because of emails they've been getting from operatives have really done a great job in giving Nestle ammo to go after Republicans, and that's being tied into vote fraud whistleblowers. So it just shows how when the grassroots, can't think and does just incomprehensibly stupid things, how it can boomerang back against us. Yeah, so
the Senate Oversight Committee gave Dana Nessel the green light to do this, and now she's actually doing it. So here's what Colbeck's resolution continues. With this declaration, the committee has declared the constitutional rights to freedom of speech, freedom of the press, and freedom to seek redress for our grievances to be null and void. They are asserting that anyone who disagrees with their flawed assessment of the election, particularly in matters regarding Antrim County, should be investigated by the Attorney General. They have, in fact, weaponized the state against citizens who disagree with them. Oh, and I forgot to mention my second point here. This report provides no evidence whatsoever, none, that Matt DePerno or Pat Colbeck are raising money for personal purposes or for personal gain for their own ends. Colbeck he received a litigation hold letter from Dominion, which means you can, if not safely assume you're going to be sued, at least expect it's a distinct possibility. And Matt DePerno, there's no evidence that he hasn't done anything other than for proposed future lawsuits. I mean, and maybe that's not the case, but they have to show, you have a burden to show, if you're alleging somebody is doing something for personal gain, that they actually did it for personal gain. And they have nothing in there whatsoever. So anyway, moving on here. This is again going back to this is Pat Colbeck's proposed call. Well, this is actually I'm not sure if this is an email or a proposed censure resolution. I don't think it is. Well, here I'll just read this. In contrast with their assertions, everything we just read, the Republican platform asserts the following. In a free society, the primary role of government is to protect the God-given, inalienable rights of its citizens. These constitutional rights are not negotiable for any American. We affirm that all legislation, regulation, and official actions must conform to the Constitution's original meaning as understood at the time the language was adopted. In this light, it is imperative for the integrity of our party that the Michigan GOP censure Senators McBroom, Tice, and Bison for their actions at the next meeting of the Michigan GOP State Committee in August. These actions are responsible for fomenting division, not unity, within not only the Michigan Republican Party, but the Republican Party nationally. Right. There was, here's the Progress Michigan running ads, blasting Lana Tice and pitting her against the Republicans. I mean, this is an ad intended to target and demoralize Republicans. And then Shane, you had a great article at Big League Politics too, pointing out Barack Obama even put out a tweet linking to an Atlantic story about what a great guy Ed McBroom is, as if Democrats are going to support him, and saying this is why we need to call for HR 1 and for nationalizing election fraud.
Yeah, and Hussein Obama was like, "Oh, poor Ed McBroom. You know, Republicans are beating him up because he did the right thing and certified voter fraud, and these Republicans are so extreme." I mean, this is like, I mean, I know we go back to the Ron Paul days. Our beliefs were that, it's a uniparty, two wings of the same bird of prey, left and right. And I think Trump has, changed that a little bit, but the remnant of that uniparty system right now is really uniting and really showing their true colors, just how evil they are and how despicably corrupt they are and how they've sold us all out. And they're working in tandem right now to destroy us and enforce this fraud. And it's something you would expect to see in like a Soviet-style one-party state.
Yeah, well, there's clearly two factions of the Republican Party. There's the grassroots and the establishment. There's no question about it. The grassroots nominated Donald Trump, and the grassroots elected Donald Trump, and the establishment have done everything in their power to sabotage his presidency from day one. And it's been the Empire Strikes Back ever since Trump was kicked out of office. And now they're trying to prevent any such person like Trump from ever taking office again. And, the sad thing about this is Senator Tice was, at least a few months ago, one of my absolute favorites. I mean, she was absolutely strong against lockdowns. She's actually the author of the bill against cynical racist theory in Michigan schools. She put in a bill to ban it altogether. Cynical racist theory is critical race theory. That's my term for it. But I mean, I don't know how you square this. I actually, a few days ago, spoke to somebody who was involved in preparing this report, and in confidence to that person, I'm not going to reveal who it was or precisely what they said, but it was to the effect of, yeah, we think that Republicans need to unify, and we need to show people that the more extreme people talking about election fraud are the problem here. And I hate to tell you, but I think that's a bad strategy. I think this is going to do everything in the exact opposite way. Right now, the grassroots is absolutely furious at the party. And the question is whether or not the party's going to understand that we're not going to go away. We're not going to settle for minor sops with respect to election reform. It has to be something that is really broad and really does a great deal to prevent what happened in 2020 from happening again. And this report had the exact opposite effect. When the enemy is singing from the rooftops about your report wasn't good strategy. I mean, to anyone in the Republican Party that might be watching this now, I think you might want to reconsider your strategists. You might not want to be heeding their counsel because they're giving you bad advice. It's blowing up in our faces. And this bit in the report calling for the Attorney General to investigate conservatives is appalling. So anyway, let me finish reading off Colbeck's email here, and then we'll talk more about where we gotta go with some of this stuff. So, in fact, there's only one paragraph left. This is summing up what he had said before. While I firmly believe that myself and others, this is Pat Colbeck. While I firmly believe that myself and others concerned with election integrity certainly have substantive grounds to disagree with their statements regarding the integrity of the 2020 election, as evidenced in my analysis of their report posted at his website, letsfixstuff.org, please do not mistake this call for censure as a derivative of a profound disagreement with their conclusions. This call for censure is a direct result of their abject disregard for their oaths of office and for the Republican platform to which they claim alignment. This is a good play. He's not saying, let's not get into a disagreement about the details of the report and what about election fraud was good points and what was not good points. This is not what this is about. You're attacking people for speaking out, and you're encouraging the weaponization of the Attorney General against these people. So he concludes, we either maintain the integrity of our party by affirming its principles, or we do not. The choice is now before the delegates, state committee members, and officers of the Michigan Republican Party. Signed, Pat Kolbeck, former Michigan State Senator. So that's Kolbeck's letter. Smart in substance and in tactics, in making the right play here. And in fact, there's even more to this than people understand. And don't get me wrong, if the report was singling out any single constituent in Michigan for ridicule and attack, that would be very bad. Calling for the Attorney General to investigate and harass and legally threaten anybody in Michigan for any reason, especially this Attorney General, is unconscionable. But there's another thing about this too that I didn't know until recently, and I don't know maybe if you knew about this, Shane, but Senator Ed McBroom, who was the author of this paper, and Matt DePerno, who was the attorney in the Antrim County case, they weren't exactly total strangers. I don't know if you know this story. I want to go through it for any of our listeners that might not, but do you know what I'm talking about here?
Yes, I've heard this. Yes, but go on.
All right, we're going to look at something, and I warn you guys, this is going to be a little bit of a long story here, but you need to know the background and the history of this because it's not pretty. So this starts with these two former Michigan lawmakers named Todd Courser and Cindy Gamrat. If you don't know who they are, you're lucky because Todd Courser and Cindy Gamrat were the subject of one of the strangest stories in, I guess it must have been 2015, shortly after they took office. I would, at the time, I was working for, I was running a campaign for Gary Glenn, he had a reputation as being a very, very strong conservative leader. And Gary Glenn and Todd Courser and Cindy Gamrat all got elected for the first time in 2014. And the media in Michigan at the time was very quick to lump the three of them all together. They would call them the three amigos. And the perception was these three were going to be these hardcore, radical Tea Party Republicans who are going to flip the script on Lansing and do a bunch of crazy stuff. And Gary Glenn, being a seasoned political operative in truth, very, very quickly and skillfully got himself away from them and established himself as his own man. But Cindy and Todd, well, they went a bit to the opposite extreme, you might say. They got right together. They shared their office resources. They decided they're going to share staff, which is a little bit strange, but they're also sharing something else, and it didn't take long for Lansing to figure that out.
At the Radisson.
At the Radisson Hotel, which is certainly the most private place you'd ever want to have an affair. Now, bear in mind, these two also had families with children at home, and they did not hesitate to hook up and to betray both of their families. But a few months in, Todd Courser started getting these mysterious texts from an anonymous phone number. And it was a guy threatening him that if he didn't resign from office, they would tell the media about his affair with Cindy. So Todd Courser, or Intercourser you might call him, came up with a brilliant plan. And so he brings his staff into his office and he says, okay, here's what we're going to do, guys. Here's what we're going to do. You're going to go home. And you're going to start putting out stories on the internet claiming that I'm a drug addict and I hang out behind the Lansing gay bars and jack people off for drug money because I've got a drug habit and all this other stuff and da 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 da. And now you might think, what purpose would that possibly serve? And of course, his staffers are like absolutely beside themselves in shock. And so he explains to them, here's the idea. You start all these crazy rumors about me. And then when the rumors come out about my infidelity, well, what we'll have done is we'll have inoculated the herd. People will think, oh, that's just more of that crazy stuff. And I don't know if that
plan... No, he called it, he actually called it, I remember he called it a controlled burn.
Yep.
And the funny thing is he did it in the primary against himself, and that led him to win. So it worked.
Did it really?
For him the first time. Yeah. He had like his people put out stuff like saying that like a door knocker saying that like he was a homosexual and did all this crazy stuff, then played the victim and won by like a really, really close margin against his opponent. So
wow.
He went back to the well one too many times.
Yeah. Well, not only that, but unfortunately for Representative Courser, his staff had already suspected he was going a bit crazy and that something was amiss when they were called into his office for this meeting. And they had their voice recorder on the entire time. And the entire recording of that conversation got played to the Detroit News. So, whoops. It all came out in the Detroit News a day or so later. And Todd Courser and Cindy Gamrat had to resign in disgrace. Actually, surprisingly, everyone thought Courser was going to have to be expelled. But at the 11th hour, they had these hearings on their fitness to serve in office. And actually, Cindy Gamrat was the one that stood her ground and had to be expelled. Courser finally did fold and did resign voluntarily at the very last minute. It was a very strange time in Lansing. I was there at the time working as a staffer, so I got a front row seat to all this stuff. I remember this is all an aside, but it's interesting stuff. I remember the day that Courser it was the very last day, the last day of his hearing. And it was his opportunity to say something for himself, and he did at least two things, and maybe a third. I'm trying to remember what the third was, but one thing I remembered was he didn't wear a tie that day, and that might seem like a small thing, but house decorum is you wear a tie when you're on the house in the house on the house floor. He didn't even respect the institution on his last day in office. Also, there was what was called a call of the house, which is when the members have to stay in their seats until they're done. And Courser got up and left the room and went up to the gallery, the house gallery, to go pray. Again, because I guess the rules didn't apply to him. But anyway, it was all a very ugly affair. It was all very embarrassing for the Tea Party. Cindy and Todd let all of their supporters down in the worst way. They were absolutely selfish and couldn't get over themselves. So Cindy Gamrat, it turned out, by the way, the person that sent those threatening texts to Todd Courser was actually Cindy Gamrat's husband. So Cindy turns around and calls her husband a stalker and blames him for everything. 2020 News did a whole 1 hour episode about this. And yeah, they're totally blameless. You know, never mind the damage they did to their families, never mind the damage they did to the Tea Party movement, never mind the damage they did to everyone that gave them money and worked for them. You know, not their fault. So Todd Courser sues the House and the Senate and a whole bunch of other staff. And his attorney was Matthew DePerno. Now, I have no respect for Todd Courser, obviously. And frankly, I don't have much respect for Matthew DePerno, but that does not mean he's not entitled to representation. I mean, here's this case here. This case went up to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Sixth Circuit. This was a federal appeals case. And look who Todd Courser sued. The House of Representatives, the Speaker of the House Business Office Director, the House Chief of Staff. I forget who Norm Sari was. He was some kind of guy at the business office. Edward McBroom, who was the chair of the Committee on the Fitness of Cindy and Todd, and the House Majority Counsel. In their official and individual capacities. That means they were sued as office holders and as individuals. So Matthew DePerno was opposing counsel in a lawsuit, a federal lawsuit against Ed McBroom as a House of Representatives member, as a committee chair, and in his personal capacity as an individual. Now, that case didn't go anywhere. Can't imagine why, but it is what it is. And Ed McBroom, who is now a senator and chair of the Oversight Committee, names Matt DePerno 8 times in this report, calling on the Attorney General to investigate him, not recusing himself or even disclosing that he has a prior adversarial legal relationship with Matt DePerno. Does that sound ethical to you?
To me, it sounds heinously unethical. It sounds like McBroom definitely had an axe to grind here with DePerno, and it's all these people, all these lawmakers who just want to ignore fraud, either because they're getting paid or getting their arms twisted to look the other way, or because their lobbyists and handlers are telling them that this is real kooky and it's going to be bad for your next step up the food chain on the your next role in government, on the dole, whatever it is. McBroom is heinously unethical here in how he wrote this report, and now it's given Nestle ammo. It's going to be used to hurt Republicans during next year's election, and it's just mind-boggling that this is happening right now. It's like living an episode of The Twilight Zone.
Yeah. I mean, we've talked about this report before, and as I said, it's a previous video on this channel. You can check it out. There's a reason why Rescue Michigan's not named in this report, and it's because we cleaved very closely to what we can actually prove. And so we weren't talking about Dominion. We were talking about signature checks, and we were talking about impeding poll challengers, and we were talking about the partisan manipulation of poll workers, and we were talking about the voter rolls being inflated. We were talking about ballots and applications going out that weren't solicited. We were talking about insecure drop boxes. We were talking about all these things that need to be fixed. So we don't like getting lumped in with everybody else that's got every other theory out there. But if this report had only criticized the details of their claims, that would have been one thing. But they didn't do that. McBroom used this as a pretext to go after and harass and bully and threaten one of his political opponents. The exact same thing that the Democrats are doing to everybody in America right now. And how are we supposed to have the moral high ground if Republicans are out doing the same thing? Although, of course, it's funny. Democrats beat up their Republican political opponents. Republicans beat up their Republican political opponents. It's only a one-way system in this country, isn't that right?
Yeah, so. I mean, that's how it's designed. That's how the way the lobbyists want it. If you want to go back and do some reading, check out Carol Quigley. He had a book. I'm forgetting the name.
Tragedy and Hope.
Tragedy and Hope. Yes. So check out some excerpts. I mean, it's a gigantic book. I haven't read the whole thing, but check out some excerpts from that. It really explains how over the past few generations, there's been a movement to control both sides of the aisles so that no matter what, if the American public votes the bastards out, there's going to be the same policy or very similar policies that are enacted, and the elites will always have their breads buttered and the people will always get screwed.
Yeah.
That has been enacted. They've been doing it for generations. People, in groups, they were called kooky when they talked about it, John Birch Society type groups. The American people did not listen, and now this is where we're at right now. We're in this hell society right now because no one listened, and it's not going to be an easy way out. Yeah,
and there's actually, I see it on my bookshelf. I'm going to go grab it. There's another one I'd recommend to people if they don't want to read 1,500 pages of it. There's a shorter one. Let me pull it real quick. I'll show you. All right, here we go. This is A Choice, Not an Echo by Phyllis Schlafly. And this is a shorter one. Actually, the original edition, this book first came out in 1964. And Phyllis Schlafly was at the time, I think she was the youngest delegate to the Republican National Convention. And it was essentially a polemic for Barry Goldwater's nomination. And she goes through the whole past history, starting from the turn of the century, and how the New York establishment And she calls them the New York establishment throughout the book, but then at the end reveals they have a name, and it's called the Bilderberg Group. And that was, as far as I can see, the first mention of the Bilderberg Group in any book anywhere. This is, again, originally published in 1964. But this new edition was published in, I think, 2015. And she actually went back and went through all of the presidential elections since 1964 and how the elites were controlling the nominating contest in all of those elections as well, including a very interesting chapter on Ronald Reagan's nomination in 1980 and how they tried to sabotage him by working out some kind of weird arrangement where Gerald Ford would actually be the president. They'd be co-presidents, but Ford would be in charge of all the important stuff. Fascinating reading. You should definitely check it out. A Choice, Not an Echo, forward by Ron Paul, by the way. Shout outs to him. I think this is actually the last book that she actually wrote. Phyllis Schlafly passed away. I think it was in 2016, so she didn't get to see Donald Trump in the White House. She did publish another book after the updated version of this one came out. But it wasn't, I mean, you could tell by the style of writing, it wasn't really her style. She's a great writer. And the other book was written by, what's the guy's name? The one that took over the Eagle Forum afterwards. I forget. But anyway, this was the last book that she really wrote, and it's absolutely fascinating, worth reading. And it's short, it's easy, and it really gets into how the establishment has been rigging both parties for a long time. And of course, Donald Trump's nomination was the first time they really failed at that. And that led to two things. One is the entire establishment really going across to control the Democrat Party as much as humanly possible. And especially making sure that Bernie Sanders wasn't their nominee. Because God forbid they didn't have either of the two nominees of the presidential, of the major parties for president. But anyway, all right, let's get back to talking about this report here and talking about what we need to do about this. The Republicans in Lansing, as you can see, have now said, despite your petitions, we're not going to give you any kind of audit. We're not even going to try. In fact, actually, let me show you again. This Ann Bolin email is something else I wanted to point out here. She mentions that the original email, you see the subject line says, response please, HB 5091. That's Representative Steve Carra's bill calling for a forensic audit. And Ann responds saying the bill has been referred to government operations, not the elections and ethics committees. The Government Operations Committee, here's a little insider secret for you guys. The Government Operations Committee is where they send bills to die. It's got a vague name, government operations. What on earth is not a government operation that the legislature passes? The answer is it's a catch-all. It's a committee that's designed to kill bills if they don't get a hearing. That's what the committee is for. It's for not bringing up bills for a hearing. So, no question, the legislature does not want to bring up audits. Here's this report they put out saying, shut up, stop calling for audits. We don't want to give you any more audits, and we're going to attack anyone that calls for an audit. So, I don't want to rehash everything we talked about with the Real Nature of Politics video, because we went into this in some detail last week, but the gist of it is, if you don't push back even harder, you're letting them win. All the Republicans, well, all any politician wants you to do, if you're asking them to do something controversial that they don't want to do, is to get you to go away without having gotten what you wanted. And they have a number of techniques they use to get you to go away. They explain it to you. They whine at you. They threaten you. And sometimes they get others to whine at you and explain it to you and threaten you. And your response has to be to push back harder. So we just talked about this report and how grossly unethical it is. So going back to Pat Colbeck's email, the only thing I would suggest is, why stop at censure? I mean, all censure really is saying, you're a bad guy. I mean, why not be demanding their resignations? And again, you know, I'm conflicted that Senator Tice is caught up in all this, but you know, I didn't put her name down on the cover of this report. She did. But I certainly have no qualms about Ed McBroom. But the other point I'd make is, you know, if you want to go after Ed McBroom or Lana Tice or John Biazon or all three of them, or heck, even though he didn't vote to adopt it, throw Jeff Irwin in there. Why not? That's your decision, folks.
Yeah, Jeff Irwin, the civil liberties advocate who
Yeah, right.
goes out to enforce COVID restrictions and take pictures of people who are protesting it so they can get doxxed.
Yeah.
That guy is a coward and a hypocrite.
Well, Jeff Irwin is a totally radical lunatic, but his district is Ann Arbor. He's in what we call a safe seat. So he didn't actually vote to adopt the report, though, because he didn't like any of the recommendations they made for election integrity, but so what? Anyway, point being, who cares? And the point being, if you're going to pursue some kind of motion or resolution against the author of this report, or authors, if you like, that's your choice. The Republican Party, your county party, your district party, your state party might all be good vehicles for that. That's a fight for you to choose to make. I would talk to your executive committee members, your fellow precinct delegates. You can call upon them to push back. And of course, you can also push back directly too. Letters to the newspapers. I would cleave to the points that Pat Colbeck raised. This is about civil liberties. In fact, we did put together a draft document with some proposed language. So we will post this and put a link to it so that you guys can copy this if you want, adopt it, make it your own. What I'm going to do, I'll make the font size bigger so it's easier to read on the screen. And let's go through it. So again, make whatever you want with this. But what I did when I drafted this is essentially go through all the arguments that we have here and break them down to make a logical flow from one point to the next. So let's read it together, shall we? First off, whereas American society is structured upon a foundation of God-given fundamental human rights enshrined and protected by the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Michigan. So we are setting the table here. We're laying the foundation for the points we're going to be making about what the report did and how it violates our civil liberties and how it threatens not just DePernos and Colbecks, but all of our civil liberties. So we start with the basics. We have a constitution, we have free speech, we have a right to counsel. These things are under threat, and we get that right here in the next paragraph. Whereas, among those foundational rights are the right to free speech and the right to counsel. The right to free speech is so fundamental that it is protected by the very First Amendment to the Constitution of the United States. The right to counsel is found in the Sixth Amendment and in all legal matters in Michigan in Article 1, Section 13 of the state constitution. Some detailed language there, and again, your call what you want to do with this, but I thought we should elucidate here. The right to an attorney is actually only really guaranteed for federal felonies in the original Constitution, but in Michigan it's for all legal matters everywhere. So that's why we said it that way. But your choice. And now we're gonna lay out something that might not sound relevant, but we want to bring this in again. This is part of what we call setting the table here. So let me read it and we'll explain. Whereas the foundational right to free speech was grievously damaged by the 2021 sham impeachment of President Donald J. Trump. In that false impeachment, the president was charged with, quote, incitement of insurrection, a non-existent crime, based on the president calling on supporters to peacefully demonstrate at the Capitol. So, it's our resolution. We're writing it the way we like it. And this is all actually 100% factually correct, too. The president's statements contained no incitement to any illegal activity, and no court of law could possibly find otherwise. And, maybe there's some courts of law that are completely insane, and we've talked about some of them before, but no, under the rules of evidence, there are legal standards for what actually qualifies as fighting words. There is Supreme Court precedent on this. There is no incitement to insurrection crime. It was all completely made up by the House and Senate. Nevertheless, the false impeachment was joined unanimously by Democrat members of Congress, joined by 17 disgraceful Republicans. And let's not miss the opportunity to call them out on that too. This politically motivated sham trial legitimized forthcoming assaults on the First Amendment rights of all Americans. And this is true, folks. Do you think the Michigan Court of Appeals have upheld the ongoing holding of Lucas Gerhard for trial for saying this gun ought to make snowflakes melt, a joke made to no particular target with no specific threat, a tenable charge, if not for the fact that the entire Democrat Party of the United States, as represented by the U.S. House and U.S. Senate, and even some Republicans joining them, went along and said, yeah, it's okay to charge people for protected speech. If it caused some kind of harm, who cares? They burned the Constitution. The Democrats and those 17 Republicans, let's never forget that. Because it wasn't just about Donald Trump. It was the destruction of the First Amendment rights of all Americans that they attacked. So let's draw that in. Because what the House, shush dogs, what the Senate was doing was encouraging the Attorney General to legally attack a citizen who sued Antrim County, calling for discovery. Whereas the foundational right to counsel was grievously damaged by politically motivated sham complaints filed against attorneys affiliated with Donald J. Trump's campaign. By the way, there was a hearing on that like 2 days ago. Did you know that? It was in a federal court in Detroit, I believe. Scott Hagerstrom, Stephanie Gentilla, Greg Roll, also Sidney Powell, and who's the other one? Rudy Giuliani. Sidney Powell and Rudy Giuliani are not Michigan attorneys, but Scott Hagerstrom is. And Gretchen Whitmer, Dana Nessel, and Jocelyn Benson all signed a legal grievance demanding his, and I think all of their, disbarment. This is an attack on the right to counsel.
And I'd like to interject that, when Giuliani was disbarred in New York, without like so much as a hearing, he was disbarred while the two Antifa terrorists who threw Molotov cocktails into cop cars, and who ended up being, attorneys, social justice attorneys in Brooklyn or whatever, they still have their license. And I think maybe not as of today, but Avenatti had his license too.
Yeah, the justice system only works one way in this country. It's insane. I mean, this used to be things that people understood, and they've forgotten it, and the media's helped them forget it. But it used to be attorneys had very broad leeway, and there were remedies. If attorney says something false in a statement to the court, there can be sanctions on the attorney or the client, depending. Going after a law license is effective. I mean, it's going after your right to put food on your family's table. It's going after their children. It's going after their spouses. It's unconscionable. And they have not shown any breach of ethical duty. They haven't alleged any breach of ethical duty. And, by the way, folks, often, especially when there's non-lawyers involved in litigation, people that sue people without attorneys, or even if they have attorneys, it's not all that uncommon for people to file frivolous grievances with the bar association or the whatever it is that certifies the lawyers in your state. And those agencies are used to getting those complaints and throwing them straight in the trash. Now, the first question is, are you an attorney in this case? If you're not, forget it. If you are, they'll say, sorry, take it up with the judge. If you think, if a judge rules you out of order, that's it. If the judge rules you did something deliberately improper, they can sanction you. There's a whole range of things you can do. But disbarment is an extraordinary remedy that's almost never, ever granted, except for like a lawyer doing wrong against his own client or something like that. But when the bar gets a legal complaint signed by the governor, attorney general, and secretary of state, they can't just throw it in the trash and say, get lost, you lunatics. They legitimized the weaponization of the licensure system of attorneys. And doing that damages people's right to counsel. And we're still setting the table here, putting this all into context for where we're going with where this report is actually abetting all this stuff. So now let's get to the report. Whereas the Michigan Senate Oversight Committee report on the November 2020 election, adopted by Senators Ed McBroom, Lana Tice, and John Bison, despite conceding on page 24 that the Michigan Court of Appeals found that the manner in which absentee ballots, comprising a majority of all ballots cast in that election, were processed in an illegal manner, concluded that, quote, citizens should be confident that the results represent the true results of the ballots cast by the people of Michigan. So, bringing that up, this report was in large part a whitewash. I mean, first of all, ignoring the fact right in front of them. Most ballots in Michigan were processed in an illegal manner. That alone could be grounds for overturning an election. I mean, the legal standards.
Hey guys, none of the ballots were adjudicated properly, but everything was fine. Move along, nothing to see here.
Yeah, and again, look, we can debate any of the details of the report, but as when we did look at the report in that other video, which you can watch on our channel, in every single section of that report, they mitigate and excuse and say it's not a big deal anyway for everything that was done illegally. And of course, maximize the attacks on everything that they disagree with, specifically everything about Antrim County. So anyway, that's we're introducing the report now. And whereas the report referenced attorney Matt DiPerno by name, you could say Matthew again. This is draft language. Do whatever you want with it, guys. The report referenced attorney Matthew DiPerno by name no less than 8 times in its effort to refute allegations made by DiPerno, and clearly in reference to DiPerno, quote, strongly recommends citizens use a critical eye and ear toward those who have pushed demonstrably false theories for their personal gain. And whereas the report alleges no facts to support its assertion that DiPerno or anyone else, there's a couple of typos right there, that DiPerno or anyone else pushed any theory for their own personal gain. And again, this is a detail, but it's an important detail. Because it's one thing to say someone asserted facts and they're wrong, but there's nothing wrong with that. But that's not what they're doing. They're saying you're asserting facts for a profit, something you can't prove or even substantiate. And whereas it would be grossly appropriate under any circumstances for a report prepared by a committee of the legislature to single out a constituent resident of Michigan for derision, which is true, that'd be bad, but it gets worse. So, and whereas the report did not stop there, but continued to recommend, quote, the Attorney General consider investigating those who have been utilizing misleading and false information about Antrim County to raise money or publicity for their own ends. Another clear reference to DiPerno. And again, undeniable. If people want to argue about that, let them argue. Ask them who else they were talking about then.
Oh, hey, maybe they were talking about the RNC who took hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars after November last year and didn't do shit and had no success, and then all the money disappeared. Maybe they're talking about Ron Romney McDaniel. Of course they aren't, but you get the point.
I don't know. All right, so whereas, and here we're going back to setting the table again. Attorney General Dana Nessel campaigned for office on a bad faith promise to, quote, sue the Trump administration all day, every day, and carried out on this promise using her office for partisan political attacks, including those related to the 2020 election. These attacks included seeking the disbarment of President Trump's attorneys. We've talked about this. And, you know something about this, Shane, sending legal threats to journalists exposing Detroit leaks. A recording of Detroit election officials instructing poll workers to abuse social distancing guidelines to intentionally impede poll challengers. Attorney General Dana Nessel thereby sought to suppress facts exposing a conspiracy to commit serial felonies under MCL 168.734. So
yeah, really, this really pertains to us specifically. This is giving Nessel more ammo to attack us personally for our accurate work that really exposed how they were going to steal the election ahead of time.
Yeah, for you guys that don't know, I was the source of Detroit leaks, and Shane was the lead reporter for Big League Politics in exposing that story. And Dana Nessel sent a seriously threatening cease and desist letter to Big League Politics, threatening them with criminal penalties for spreading disinformation, which is, of course, absolute garbage. But when you're the state attorney general and you have unlimited legal resources, you can file frivolous complaints. And guess what? We can't get her disbarred, even if her complaints are meritless and made in bad faith, you hypocritical liar. But so it's important to set the table here, because they didn't, if the attorney general was Bill Schuette and the report says, yeah, maybe the attorney general ought to investigate these people, the attorney general will be like, nah. But no, it's not. It's Dana Nessel, a hardcore partisan lunatic who loves to go after political enemies. And that's who the Senate Oversight Committee Republicans thought would be a good person to encourage, and who has now, in fact, actually taken those actions. That should probably be added into this document now. But let's go on. One of the things about this document, it's already kind of on the long side. Some of you might think it's too long. Hey, do what you want with this. If you want to shorten it, that's fine. I think these are important points to make. And Shane, when you looked over this draft originally, you came up with some good additional things to add. When I tried working them in, I thought, man, it's even longer now. But we'll talk about those recommendations because those were good too. So, again, this is only a draft. It's only for you folks. You can use this or not use it. You can write your own from scratch, or you can write a brand new one, or you can use this word for word or do whatever you want to it. So, let's go on here. Whereas it is unconscionable that a report prepared by the legislature would exhort a partisan attorney general with a history of abusing her office for partisan political purposes to investigate and harass a Michigan resident based on wholly unsupported accusations. And again, they provided no evidence whatsoever that DePerno or Colbeck or anybody was raising money for personal profit. And whereas Senator Ed McBroom cannot be considered a neutral party with respect to DePerno, DePerno was the attorney of record in a lawsuit against the Michigan House of Representatives and then Representative Ed McBroom. Additionally, at the time the suit was filed, Senators Lana Tice and John Bison were also members of the House of Representatives. They were there when this all happened. And whereas Senator McBroom opted not to recuse himself, not to refrain from personal attacks against personal enemies, and not even to disclose his past adversarial relationship to DePerno. Remember, folks, this oversight report was covered by international media. It was covered nationally, internationally, locally, everywhere. Putting this out was a huge story. Ned McBroom didn't remind reporters, by the way, the guy that we were encouraging the Attorney General to investigate also happens to be someone that sued me personally in federal court. That lawsuit might have been meritless or not, but either way, every lawsuit's as serious as a heart attack. How would you respond to someone causing you a heart attack? You'd be pretty mad, I'll bet. Mad enough to abuse your office? To sick the Attorney General on him? Anyway, so now getting back to kind of tying this all together. Whereas in the broader context of ongoing attacks against the American people's right to free speech and the right to counsel, the report bolsters and encourages these attacks in a transparent attempt to intimidate and silence all citizens, exposing the misconduct of election officials, challenging the result of the election, and advocating for legal and policy remedies. That's us. That's what this report was all about. It was getting you to shut up, getting you to back down, because you might be afraid of being bullied or browbeaten by the next report put out by the legislature. And by the way, this is about where in the document I might have maybe wanted to add in some of the recommendations that you'd made, Shane. One was pointing out that Barack Obama himself has capitalized on this political on this political document for spreading the big lie. The big lie, of course, being that everything on the election was on the up and up. I thought about adding that in, and the reason I chose not to is only because the other side using it for their benefit is not as strong as the fact that these actions were in themselves entirely unethical. But again, folks, look, use whatever you want. I mean, this is for you to choose to do. I'm in one county, I'm in one congressional district. I can urge my Republican colleagues to pass a resolution, but you all everywhere else too. And what you choose to do with this is entirely up to you. So like I said, use this to whatever extent you like, add to it if you like to it, embellish. The other thing, Shane, you mentioned is you showed me this email you got from Donna Lisinski, who's demanding a commission to investigate the role that Michigan Republicans had in the January 6th so-called insurrection. And yeah, I mean, this is it. They are brazen. They are brazen about abusing their offices to attack their political opponents, to attack the people of Michigan. And this is an absolute outrage. I mean, there was a time when this was just considered absolutely beyond the pale. Like it used to be. I remember when I was working in Gary Glenn's office, I forget what the incident was, but there was something where a constituent had some issue, and it was an issue with the local, with his local government or something. And, and Gary asked what we should do about it. And I said, well, the problem is, this citizen is your constituent, but the town is also your constituent. It's like our offices were allowed to help people out with problems with state agencies because the state's not their constituent. It was fine for Representative Riley and me to help out Lucas Gerhard because Chippewa County was not our constituent. But you're supposed to ethically not get involved in disputes between your constituents. Now, I mean, this is all like out the window. Like now it's just like, go after anybody you want. I mean, it's lunacy. But anyway, so here's how we're getting to the conclusion of this this resolution here. And by the way, in terms of writing your own resolution, you don't have to use the whereas format. We like to do that just because it kind of looks like you're making this point and then this point and this point and this point. But whatever looks nice, whatever makes sense to you, it's fine. There's no rules to this, so do whatever you like. So anyway, whereas the committee finds that this committee, and that would be your local Republican committee or your local county party or wherever else you want to pass this. I mean, your town council could pass it if you're on the board, maybe. I don't know. Any body that you're a part of that you want to get involved in this, you could bring it to them. So this committee finds the Michigan Senate Oversight Committee report on the November 2020 election to be the product of gross official misconduct. It is improper that the report isolates an individual to make unsupported allegations that the individual makes claims for personal profit. Unconscionable that the report calls upon the Attorney General to harass that individual based on said unsupported allegation. And a compounding breach of ethics for committee members to fail to disclose their past adversarial legal relationship to the target of these allegations. Therefore, be it resolved. The committee calls for the resignation of the author of the Michigan Senate Oversight Committee report on the November 2020 election, Senator Ed McBroom. In the first draft, I had also put in Lana Tice and John Baez on there. Again, I'm kind of torn about Lana Tice, but you know what? Again, your choice, folks. Hit all three of them if you like. Let Senator Tice say why this report could have been different and da-da-da. Like I said, maybe I have a soft spot for her. I don't know, but it's your call. If you want to hold all three of them to the fire, good, you should. Don't let me stop you. Resolve that copies of this resolution be transmitted to our Republican representatives and senators in the Michigan legislature. Let them know what you did. And to the Michigan Republican Party, let them know. And to local news media, let them know. Not that they'll cover it, but yeah. So there it is, folks. It's a lengthy resolution. My experience with my local party is that wordsmithing can be tricky, but maybe if you start off with this, there'll be not too much to change or edit around. So we'll send this around so you guys can do what you will with it. But yeah, I'd say, why stop at censure? What they committed was an absolutely obscene abuse of ethics. And this is the problem that Republicans have. The other side will do things that are so extreme that we have difficulty finding the words to call them out on it. The governor locking our state down was the most radical destruction of our civil liberties in state history. It was absolutely devastating. And Republicans couldn't find the words to explain how obscene this was. Well, here again, the legislative report calls for a partisan lunatic attorney general to persecute a citizen, and in doing so, damage the right of citizens to free speech and to counsel. That's extraordinary. And in doing so, divide and damage and demoralize the entire Republican Party, the entire conservative movement. And over a policy, by the way, that's supposed to help them get reelected. If nothing changes in election policy, that could be enough for Republicans to lose majority. So why do we have to be the ones dragging their butts over the line to get policy made that might actually help them win re-election by preventing fraud? It's just insulting. It's embarrassing. And you have to respond to extreme actions by calling out the extremity and pointing out how extreme it is. And don't let the other side shift the window of what can be considered normal. Because, we're going to get attacked. calling for resignations of Republicans. They're going to say, no one's going to work with you in Lansing ever again. You're calling for Republicans to resign? Look, folks, we didn't call for the Attorney General to persecute Michigan citizens. I've said before, I wasn't a fan of Matt DePerno. I wasn't a fan of his motions. I wasn't a fan of his legal arguments. I wasn't a fan of his representation of Todd Corser. But he's the victim now. And if we are allowing the legislature to victimize him, he will not be the last. So what choice do you have? When nearly 10,000 petitions are delivered to Lansing, and the response of the Republicans in Lansing is, get lost.
The response is worse than get lost. The response is, Ms. Nessel, punish the people leading this army of folks, tens of thousands of people who signed their names, willing to show, hey, we're not intimidated. We know this was stolen. We're never backing down. And they represent, thousands and thousands more in the grassroots. So what do? Ms. Nessel, do our dirty work for us. Piss on our constituents. That's what happened.
Yeah. We don't want to be here, guys. We wanted to work with the legislature. We wanted to have hearings on our bills. I mean, even calling for a forensic audit. We know the governor's not going to sign that into law. But you can't even go through the motions. You can't even make the arguments. And now look where we are. I mean, frankly, I have more sympathy for Republican politicians in Lansing than most of our viewers do. I guarantee you that if you're watching Republicans. I mean, frankly...
Adam, you're a big softie.
I mean, I'll say something that our viewers will hate, but I'll say it because I believe it. I think Mike Shirkey would have been a good candidate for governor. Better than James Craig. But, that's too late now. That's not happening. And after all this, sorry, folks. I think Mike Shirkey had some closet real conservative impulses that he was biding his time for and doing what he thought was necessary for him to do as majority leader. Might have been bad calls. Might have been. I don't know that James Craig is even a conservative in truth. I did a video about that the other day. You can watch it on this channel. It's right there. Just click on the link for our channel. You'll see it there. But that's my point, folks. We want to work with the legislature. We postponed doing this kind of stuff as long as we possibly could. But if this goes on and we say nothing, then we're the fools. And we can't do that. So, that's where we are now, guys. It's not a pleasant place. However, it's not too late. There will be some petitions coming out very soon, which will be a great opportunity for you, not just to collect the petitions for these policies, but to leverage those efforts to build your own local organization, to get new people motivated and engaged, to identify the people that will sign petitions for clean elections and for opposing any future lockdowns, and identifying the people in your community who have the sense and the compassion and the caring to sign a petition and maybe even want to get involved. That's how you get the politicians in line, is by growing an organization that holds them accountable politically in election season if necessary. And we're still a long way away from next year's election, folks, but it'll be upon us before we know it. Now's the time to start building. So I hope this has been informative and helpful. I hope you guys make use of it. I will post this language to our site. And again, it's yours to use however you like. You can write your own articles, or you can use this. You can copy it. There are no rules against plagiarism in politics. So do whatever you want with it. So that's about all we have to say on that, I think, unless Shane, there's anything you want to add.
Just general frustration. I'm not really, it's crazy, someone who I, where I come from ideologically, I thought, they're all in on it, they're all in cahoots. But the stuff we're seeing now is just beyond anything I would have imagined, that they would attempt to pull off. I mean, I think maybe the silver lining is they are so scared that the American people are waking up, that there's so many people coming out of the woodwork and getting involved and starting their own groups and planning, and they know exactly what happened in the election. They know exactly who was responsible. They know exactly that the Republicans were the prime enforcers of the fraud after the election last year. So I think the system is panicking, and all they can really do at this point is double down on their corruption, and it could end bad for them in the end. At least I hope and pray that it will.
Yeah. I mean, giving them the benefit of the doubt, and I won't give Ed McBroom the benefit of any doubt, but I think maybe some of the people that signed on to that Senate report actually thought it was being helpful. I was at James Craig's non-kickoff speech the other day, and everyone there is saying, we got to unify the party. Like, you think that putting out that document helped unify anything? I mean, they should be embarrassed. Their colleagues should be furious with them for allowing them to put that out. I mean, what an embarrassment. Ed McBroom should be stripped of his committee assignments. I mentioned this in another video. There's a reason why McBroom is chair of the Oversight Committee, and there was the same reason why McBroom was chair of the committee to kick out Cindy and Todd. Cindy with an S. He had a reputation for being a straight shooter and fair and neutral and unbiased and blah, blah, blah. And while that reputation's destroyed now, you just put out a hit piece on your political opponents. I just got a message from Shane that his sound went off. So I'm sorry we lost you there, Shane. But I think we're just about done, just about wrapped up. Only thing I wanted to add besides everything that we've talked about was we did have a news conference in Lansing this past Wednesday for Lucas Gerhard. We did not have a huge media presence there, but there were 3 or 4 news agencies that covered it. Well, I should say 3 or 4 news agencies interviewed me. Only one actually covered it, and they didn't show any video. What can I say, folks? I'm such a great interviewee that they never air my stuff. I'm used to it. I did an interview for ABC Nightline last year for like about an hour, and everything they were trying to do is get me to somehow admit some kind of connection to the people accused of kidnapping Whitmer, and of course they didn't get anything from me, so they just didn't air it at all. I'm used to that. Us Against Media did cover the story that was very good, so I'll post a link in the description to go check that out. Can't say anything about legal updates for Lucas just yet. I know they're still reevaluating their next steps in their legal strategy, and I do think they have some announcements coming soon, but I can't jump the gun on that. We will report to you when we know more. But I do know that people have seen the coverage, and it's led to people contributing to Lucas's legal defense fund, his GoFundMe. So thanks everybody for doing that. I'll just put it up on the screen real quick. Here's Lucas's GoFundMe. He's up to almost $86,000 so far. We did up the goal amount. Lucas's actual legal expenses as of about a month ago was like $96,000. So there is more to go, and there's going to be more in the future, but the contributions have been immensely beneficial for his family. I know they are unbelievably grateful for all of that support. I remember Lucas's father, Mark, he needed a new stove because his stove stopped working, and he couldn't afford one because he said, I have to buy a new stove every month to pay for your tether. And the support that they've gotten has allowed them to buy a stove so that they can grill vegetables again. So yeah, they're very happy for that and for all the support. So thanks everybody for that. And I'm sure we'll keep you posted when there's other case updates on that. So all right, folks, thanks again for all that you do for Liberty, and we look forward to having some exciting news for you, hopefully as soon as next week. So, all right, have a great one, everybody. Peace.